Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar on managing the requirements flow by bringing together capabilities in modern requirements. We're just going to give everyone a few more minutes to join and then we will get started shortly. All right, hello everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. At least for us in Toronto, it's the morning. Over the past few months, we've been running a deep dive webinar series that covered the ins and outs of many of modern requirements' capabilities. And so today we're exploring how to manage the requirements flow by using these different capabilities of modern requirements. As always, we're going to keep some time at the end for questions, so please drop them into the question box and we will get to them either during or after the session. If you have joined these webinars before, you'll know our general flow, but our speakers today include myself as your host and Asif Sharif, the Chief Technologist here at Modern Requirements. If you don't mind just going to the next slide. There we go, that's us. So if you are interested in receiving a free trial of Modern Requirements, you can visit the link on the screen at modernrequirements.com/try-now. We will also be sending around an email with the video recording afterwards, and we'll also include a link to start your free trial from there. So stay tuned for that after the webinar. Just go to the next slide. Yep, our next webinar will be held on September 30th at the same time, and that one will focus on the medical devices industry and particularly how to manage medical device design controls more efficiently using modern requirements. And so we will also be sending around invites for this webinar shortly after, and you can also find that on our website. All right, over to you, Asif.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Amberine. All right, folks. So as I was preparing for this webinar, what I did this morning was I got up bright and early, and I figured I'd go for a nice walk through the forest, and that sort of would clear my head, and I can then come up with some brilliant ideas how to do this presentation. So what I I came back from the walk. It was a couple of hours, 6 to 8, and I came back and I redid my slides because one of the messages of what we are trying to do with in this session in particular is what's the best way to use modern requirements, and of course within the larger forest of the problems and the challenges and the opportunities we have in our businesses and our organizations, how best can we use it? And so what's the recipe? And certainly you could define your SOPs, your standard operating procedures, so that there's more consistency and so on, but really there is no right or wrong ways. So like this picture shows, big tree that way. And so really going through this journey of understanding what is the optimal process, which path do you take, the less traveled or the easiest one, is really sort of up to you as the approach you want to take and how much do you want to discover. Because ultimately it is not about a process. It is about finding the right process, or maybe not even the right process, an effective process at a point in time, but most importantly, improving that process, especially as the terrain changes on you. And life is always in motion. And so is work and our projects. So how do you adapt to a different environment than where you used to be? And Toronto is going to be like this, especially the forest that I visit in the next month or 6 weeks, and that'll be gorgeous. And then finally, after 2-3 months, the terrain will change again. And so really, as we go through this whole journey of identifying what is the best process, whether you're using Agile or you're using Scrum, perhaps you're using a more structured approach, to each their own. And really that matters because, as Rumi said, Rumi is, by the way, a Persian poet. He's the greatest poet that ever lived, as far as I can tell. And he said there are many ways to kneel and kiss the ground. And that really talks about sort of personal diversity, and being able to sort of say that people need to find their own ways, because your organizations are different and your challenges are different. But in the end, you want to celebrate that you have reached a significant milestone and then to continually improve on that. So you're really not competing with others as much as you ought to be competing with yourself. So on this bright picture that sets the mood, let's talk about what I'm going to talk about in the session today. So today, so one idea is that since there are so many pathways that you can take, and of course you can mix and match and adapt, you could come up with some recipes, and you can follow the recipe to the T, or you can be more creative in the process. It doesn't really matter. At least in my mind, it doesn't matter. But and maybe some industries does matter, where you need to be very sort of systematic in the way you do it, and you are kind of just sort of a robotic process of doing it, and that if that's needed, you do that. But certainly, when I do my work, it's really sort of adapting and experimenting to see what's going to work best. So in this scenario, we are going to, I'm calling it the scenario 1 because there are so many variations, and maybe later on we'll do a few other scenarios. But in this scenario, I'm going to start with Smart Docs, do some diagramming, do review management of the Smart Docs, and look at trace analysis and see how things really come together. Now, what I did for this particular session was I did not go create a bunch of content in advance. I found that previously when I've done that, I got a few comments from people saying, can you just start from scratch, show us how you're doing everything. So I'm going to try that approach this time, and we'll create everything from scratch. So we'll create a meta template, and we'll go through the entire process. But there are a few key messages I want to present here. So one is, so let's say I want to create a smart dock, and in my smart dock, I'm just going to go and say, let's just call this ASIF webinar 1, although it's not 1, but okay, fine. I'll call it ASIF webinar template 1. How about that? All right. So that's at least consistent with what is true. So the root of my smart doc template is going to be a document, and I'm going to use parent-child relationship and relate it as an alternate link type. And of course, if you haven't seen the more detailed webinar on how to do document smart doc configuration and so on, I did do a deep dive webinar maybe a couple of months ago now, but it is on our website. So please help yourself to that. Plus, we have other resources on this topic as well. Right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define some sections in my smart doc, which is to really say, put things like introduction and so on. And then what I'll do is I'll define, since this is an Agile template, we'll do epics, and then epics can have features can have user stories. All right. So let's say this is my structure. Actually, you know what? Let's not do this structure. Let's take a slightly different approach. So I'll just do epic and features here. Okay. And we'll save this. All right. But I'll create another template and I'll save it as, say, 2. And this one, actually, I won't call it 2. What I'll call it is, I'll call it feature to user story. Okay. So this is feature to user story. And in here, what I want to do is this guy should be a feature and this guy should be a user story. And the idea here is that I want to have one document that's going to be epics and features and another sets of document that goes feature and my user stories in it. And so we'll do that. So user story. Okay. I've created 2 documents. And you'll see why I actually chose to create documents in that particular manner. So let's start first. Say we have a large system. We have a large project or system, and I'll call it my system X high-level requirements. But in here, I actually want to use the original template, the first one I created, which has epics and features in it. So let's go here and let's do this now. So I'll go here and I'll create a section for introduction. Of course, meta templates are only created by probably initially and then updated once in a while. So most people don't have to understand the nuances of creating a meta template. They'll just use it. But I'm doing it so that you have a better appreciation of what templates are supporting the smart doc I'm creating. So I go for epic would be, let's just say my epic 1, and my epic 1 is going to in turn have a set of features. So I'll go feature 1, and then feature 2, and so on and so forth. Okay, feature 3. And of course, if I did want to drill down and define other work items, I could. I mean, I could go here and sort of define the details of my feature. My feature details go here, and then I can just insert let's say a table in there, and then do the needful. right? So in this way, I'm creating my smart doc. People can now read the preamble, like introduction, overview, whatever else, and then we have our our um, our epics and features. Okay. Now, so as I called it, this is my high-level requirement spec. So I'm doing the high-level sort of big picture view here. Of course, these epics and features will show up in the backlog in the same hierarchy as you see here. But well, yeah, let's do one thing. Let's go back to this template. And what we'll do in this template is I want to actually insert another section called diagram, because I want to have a diagram in there. I want to set the context of things. So I've created a diagram in there, and that's probably enough. So we'll close this. Now, if I go in here, you will not see the diagram in there, because the meta template configuration for a smart doc is embedded in the smart doc. So what you have to do is select the folder or the document and say update the templates of the documents in that folder or that particular document, and then you say update, and then that meta template changes will get inherited into the smart doc, right? So now if you do new, you will see a diagram here. So I could go here, I could say this is my context diagram or my system diagram or whatever it may be, and then I'll simply drag and drop this and position it at the right place, right? And then we'll continue working on the diagram. Now, if I'm defining my epic features and all of this, then my diagram has to be really setting the context in which to understand this epic and features. And then you could have lower level diagrams for each feature level if you wanted. So you could drill down on the diagramming. And we'll get to that a bit later on. But now that I have this system X specification at high level, let's go create another document. But in this document, we'll do feature one spec. Okay. But in feature one spec, I'm going to use the other template I created called feature to user story. And the whole intent of that exercise is that I want to begin with this feature. So I might bring in feature one of 5797. So I could go here and I could just say insert. So I'll bring in that particular feature. So maybe I will first just go create a section. So here's my intro for this doc, right? So this is my introduction for this document. But then I will just go here and search for the word feature. I found I can select one or more features depending on how many features I want to spec in here, and I can simply drag and drop this here. So now that feature is in this document as well. If you look at the ID of this feature is 5797. If you go here, 5797, it's the same exact work item, right? And if I were to change this here, like so, then in here, that work item is also changed because it's the exact same instance of that particular work item. All right. So now let's decompose this. So if I go to my user story, I'll just say user story 1 and user story 2 and so on and so forth. So now I'll spec out my user stories here. So the information between the two documents are actually connected. So let's go to our backlog view. And in a backlog view, let's take a look at what structure got created there. So what I do want to do is I will enable the epic level and then switch to epic. And you can see that the entire hierarchy, the epic, the feature, user stories have come together effectively, in our backlog view. Although within Smart Docs, we actually created very useful ways of presenting the epic with its features, and then each feature having its own specification, as in here. Okay. So the idea being, you don't have to create one large document. You can actually create multiple documents but have the information interconnected across them. And this will also mean when we generate a traceability matrix, things will be put together properly. Now, the one thing you might also want to do is add your test cases to your specification. So let's go update our template again. And you will see that I'm discovering the opportunity to enhance my template as I'm using it, and then it gets updated. So you sort of evolve it the first couple of times you use it, and then you'll have a good quality template that everyone else can reuse. So I'm going to define a test case, and I'm going to specify that I should use, or the system should use, a tested by link type in there. And also for the user story, I want to show both description and the acceptance criteria. But for description, I will not show a label. For acceptance criteria, I will. Okay, so we'll set it up like this so I can have test cases in there. And we shall save this. And as before, we will update this particular Smart Doc template with the change in the template. And by the way, if I had invoked, if I'd selected this and invoked update template, then I could have updated the template for all the documents in this area. So now if you go here, so a couple of changes we made. One is I wanted to see acceptance criteria for user story. And so I can go here, I can say that as a user, I can do wonderful things so that the world is a better place. And my acceptance criteria is that my mom is proud of me. So as you do this, you will then see that show up in there, and then you can continue to flush it out. But now you might also go and define your test cases. So test case 1 for the user story, and then test case 2, and so on and so forth. Now, with test cases, you might actually know that test cases sometimes, the same, in fact, often, a test case can belong to or test multiple user stories. So you won't have a many-to-many relationship, in which case you can simply do an insert. So let's say 5805. So I'll just do 5805, and I shall simply drag this one and drop it on that story. So you'll see that particular test case now belongs to both the stories. Now, if you were trying to do this elsewhere, say in your backlog view, or, well, you couldn't do it in your backlog view anyways, because backlogs don't allow you to have non-parent-child relationship links. So you would have to open up the work item, and after 6 clicks, you would have created a link. So it's really time-consuming. This becomes extremely efficient to define those links. Now, for those of you that are already in love with Smart Docs, and you will be happy to know that SmartDoc is one of our most active modules from an R&D point of view. We get a ton of really useful and excellent input as to how to make SmartDocs better. And so we're constantly iterating through and adding more functionality to it. So just a sidebar on that note. So currently, so when we started with SmartDocs, we said, okay, you know what, people may have 100, 200 work items in there. This is 2 years ago when we initially launched SmartDocs, and that should be enough. And it was enough for about a month until people started to use it seriously, and then we realized we needed to support a few hundred work items, and then that worked for another few months, and then we realized that there were clients of ours that wanted to use SmartDocs with 1,000 work items, and then that became not enough even. So recently we have sort of done some re-architecture work, and currently in our next release, which is going to be currently scheduled is end of September, but it is we're targeting about 5,000 work items within a SmartDoc. Of course, 5,000 work items could mean a 5,000 page document if you export to Word or PDF, and Word would probably start to misbehave when you do that. But nevertheless, many of our clients have asked that, and so we're doing that, and we're adding a whole bunch of new stuff in here. So SmartDoc remains a very exciting capability for us and for our clients. So now we saw how we can take a high-level document and then create sub-documents that are linked to it, and then further decompose it into test cases, and even have the same work items reappear multiple times within the SmartDoc. So SmartDoc by far is the best approach to authoring content, to creating your requirements, your work items, whether you're creating risks or hazards, you're doing risk hazard analysis, or simply using it in a sort of a more lean, agile approach. The advantage of SmartDocs really is that ultimately it's easy for people to absorb this information. Imagine that if you have to go to the backlog view, pick a work item, follow its links to other information, and its links to other information. It's a network of information where everything is connected to everything else, and you have to create a boundary around it somehow. And therefore, it is highly unlikely somebody will get it right, unless you're a genius. And so unless you're Noam Chomsky, you're going to have a hard time. And certainly I'm no Noam Chomsky. Creating documents within SmartDoc makes it presentable. That's why people have done it in this way for years and years. But at the same time, these are work items, so you can manage your work items. It gives you the best of both worlds. On top of it, you have this introduction that's available to you. So you can provide the details so that people can contextualize how things ought to be done. Now, the other thing which is useful, and you can remember, I actually added this context diagram in SmartDocs so that I can actually build out a visual that again sets the context more, but in a more visual way. So a lot of people are visual. They'd rather see a picture that tells a really powerful story than read a lot of text, right? I'm visual. So when I design in modern requirements or the new product that I'm currently building, there's a lot of drawing happening. There's a lot of pictures, because how many words can you write? We can draw 50 diagrams or concept models, much more powerful than writing a book or two. So visuals are very, very powerful, certainly, because they can be very efficient in telling a story. In fact, I was talking to a friend today, and the idea came up about poetry and philosophy. So to me, a diagram is like poetry, and a narrative that explains things in great detail is like philosophy, right? So poetry can be very potent, very sort of succinct, and so can a diagram be. So if you're a poet, then diagrams might relate to you natively. Shape. So let's say, no, I'm not going to put anything in there. You can imagine whatever you fancy to be in your boxes, or outside your boxes, or these boxes. So there is also a webinar that goes through diagramming in detail, but the whole idea is that you are creating these diagrams that is telling the right story, setting the mood, setting the context as to how to read a given smart doc. And of course, you can do all your coloring and whatever text you want to write. You can do all of that. And I will use my favorite green here, something like that. And so there you are. So now you know my favorite color is this green. Now you've created a pretty picture. Hopefully it tells a good, powerful story. And that sets the scene as to how to understand the rest of the document. Okay. So diagrams are very, very useful. We'll get into some more advanced diagramming things shortly, because I do want to point out a couple of things, because we talked about how to drill down on a single diagram, on a single smart doc and create low-level smart docs. This morning I was having a call with one of our clients, and she was taking a larger diagram at a macro level, and she drilled down into lower level diagram. And she's on the other side of the Atlantic from where we are. But it was an interesting conversation, because the same idea of decomposition of smart docs applies to diagramming as well. Although she pointed out a flaw in my thinking, and for that we're going to make some adjustments. And so we are more than happy to learn from you guys, as hopefully you are to learn from us. By the way, somebody's asking, do you need an enterprise license for what we are seeing so far? So yes, you do. Smart Docs is a function of the enterprise license. The other thing that somebody is asking a question, I'll just deal with that right now, is about the different types of diagramming. So there's certainly business process modeling you can do, as in this activity diagram, but you can do basic flow charts and BPMN, again, business process related, but you can do cause and effect diagrams. You can do just sort of a traditional context diagram. You can do swim lane, which is again within the realm of business process, both horizontal and vertical with separators. You can do data flow diagram. Of course, that would be an example of not really a business process, but data flow. You can do UML activity diagram. That's probably more business process-like. You can do state machines. You can do use cases, and you can also annotate. Let the beauty you love be what you do. And if you don't know who said this, this was a translation of a Rumi poem by Coleman Bark. And of course, Rumi, as I already mentioned, is the greatest poet that ever lived, as far as I can tell. So let that be what you do. But there are so many different types of diagrams that you can use. Right. Of course, you see that now here, and we have a nice document. Somebody who wants to read it can read through the document and get a good appreciation of what things look like. Now, when you have a document and you need to, as time goes by, they will evolve, and as they evolve, you'll want to version it. So let's go to version. Let's create a version. So I'll just call it V1 draft, and we will. Oops, close that. So I've created a version 1. Let me go and make a few edits here. Some changes. Introduction. I'll open up introduction, and I will provide more details here. We'll close this. Oh, by the way, there is a client we have in Switzerland, and they came up with a really interesting requirement. They said, when I open up this work item, and I'm seeing a lot of the details, and I want to update not only the description, but a whole bunch of other details. So give us the ability to drag this onto a second screen. And when I drag and drop it on the second screen, and as I click through different work items, that screen would still be open on the left, on the other screen, and I can make updates, and it'd be synchronized both ways, because it would just provide for much more efficient experience. So that's coming up in our update 1 end of September. Oh yeah, so I was making some changes, and then we might also go and just create another feature. So I might say feature 4, and so on. So let's go now. Let's look at version. If you look at version 1 now, then it's going to be. You will see that all my changes that I had done are gone, right? So I don't have feature 4 and so on. So the advantage of versioning, you'll know that in Azure DevOps, there is no versioning per se, right? I mean, there's revision history, but you can't go back in time and see how things look like. But this allows you to sort of say, hey, you know what? That was the most awesome walk in the forest. Let me experience that again. And it's like taking in a picture, and then you can experience it again. And that's what versioning gives you, similar to baselining. But you can also compare it. You can compare it, and you can see in Redline that I've added certain things. If I remove things, it would be crossed out. So you get a very nice, clean view of how things are evolving. Because history at the work item level, which shows you change log, is not that useful, because things are simply being listed, and you see blobs of text. You don't see the redlining. So this just makes it user-friendly. All right. So versioning is very useful. Click on Save as Word or PDF to get a redlined version of the document, or just click on Word or PDF in this view. So it will save the old version of the Smart Doc in Word or PDF. You can also roll back. You can also branch, as in cloning the whole document, where all the work items will get new IDs, and the structure would be maintained, and a new Smart Doc would get created when you do a clone. So there's a question that says, is when you version a Smart Doc, is the diagram versioned as well? So this visual is versioned. So when you open up a diagram, you will see the old layout you had. So that will be, so when you open it up, you will see how it used to be before. The underlying diagram content is also being versioned, but we don't open up the old version of the diagram, because in here, you can't edit it. So it's just sort of static. So we just show the visual for the diagram in here. There was another question that says, can you get redlined on the document between versions? And the answer is yes. So when you do compare, you can actually choose which version do you want to compare to. So you can actually compare any two versions. Open a version and then select another version that you want to compare to. So any two versions can be compared. Graham says, awesome. Oh, that is awesome. All right, guys. So let's take a look at the next thing. So that's the whole idea about how you can take a smart doc, break it up into many small smart docs, and have diagrams in there, and you're really building your epic story, right? So you're writing your Macbeth or Mahabharat in smart doc in a way that people can digest it and work with it. Of course, if you're building a small little application or it's a little toy, then surely just create a list of requirements, give it to somebody, and hopefully they'll get it right, and they probably will if it's small enough. It's complex enough, you need to give it thought. And knowledge management, content presentation has to be a process you need to go through. All right. So let's take a look at review management. So once I have my document ready, I might initiate a review. And in the review, I would invite reviewers to provide feedback or approvers to provide sign off. Okay, so reviewers provide feedback, approvers can sign off or just provide comments. You give it a name, sys X review 1. You give it a description, you can select a due date. By default, in this case, the due date is a week out. And by the way, that's configurable. You can choose that the review be done as a package or things that are reviewed individually. You can close your reviews automatically, or you can request e-signature. And so if you're sort of doing medical devices, or you're doing some high-end pharma project where you need to make sure that things are signed off and people are held accountable, then yeah, e-signature is a good idea. But if you're just doing sort of less sort of, you're not reporting to FDA and so on, then you might not want to do that. So just leave it unchecked. You can also do state transition. By the way, one of our clients builds rocket ships, and so obviously for them, getting e-signature becomes really, really important. And then an email is sent to people who can then provide approval and feedback. So there's a question, does a reviewer or approver need a full license or a license at all? And the answer is no, they do not need any license, except for they have to, when they come here, they can select stakeholder mode, and in which case it'll let you in and give you access to various MR artifacts, read-only mode, not all of them, but they can do review and approval in here without needing a license. All right, so that's taken care of. So now SmartDoc is there, and so you look at this and you approve this, or you look at that and you say, no, I need to reject it for some reason. So if you're reviewing this for the first time, it's not an issue. But what if you're reviewing this for the 5th time, and now you want to see what has changed compared to what was there before? And so you can actually bring up the red line view, the compare view, and now I can see you actually made some change, and I might still say it should be green. And I wonder if I keep saying this because green is my favorite color, or I'm just a environmentalist in my heart. But regardless, so you put a comment in there, and then the initiator will accept your comment and say yes, yes. You might say, yes, let's make the world a better place for children. There we go. All right. So now you've made a comment and they've responded to it, and then they'll go make an update. And likewise, you can go through all of this and do the needful. You can also go and see how much progress is being made and by who. As the initiator, you can also change your due date because, as you know, people get busy and or things just have to be moved out for some reason. And so you can change the due date, you can cancel it, you can close review, you can send reminder. And yeah, and so you can do that. So review management is a good way to get feedback, get approval, get sign off, and all of that information remains in the system for historic reasons. And also, by the way, when you are commenting and doing things, you can see other people's comments. So the idea is to facilitate collaboration. All right, so that's how review management works. Now, what I do want to suggest, by one more thing. When you start a review, a version of a smart doc is automatically created. So the system will automatically create a version of the smart doc when the review begins, right? So if I go to smart docs and I go here and I say, let me change the change. And so I've changed something here, but now if I do a compare, I can actually do a compare to my review one that I initiated, and I can see this is the only thing that has changed since then. So a version is created for every time you initiate a review. By the way, there was another question that somebody was asking about, do you have data dictionary capability in smart docs? So data dictionary has a couple of connotations. One is that you want to define your entities and your attributes. And in fact, if you look at our BA BOK template, in there you have domain entities and attributes, and you can define your data dictionary. And you can create a smart doc template for it. So that would certainly work. On the other hand, what you can do is you could, if you wanted a glossary, you can sort of create a glossary and sort of copy and paste a glossary in the smart doc. One thing that we are going to release, hopefully not in this this release, hopefully the next one, but certainly in the next 4-6 months, is we're implementing a full glossary support where you can actually upload your own glossary file. So let's say you work in a insurance company and you have your terminology from the Accord standard, and not everybody understands the Accord standard and what things mean. So you upload that glossary. So in Smart Doc, you see a word, you hover over it, it'll give you a flyover with the meaning that is in the dictionary file. So that's something that we are working on, and you'll have it soon enough. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is, I want to show you diagramming drill down. Oh, by the way, guys, so as I show you diagramming drill down, I do want to ask you one thing. So, as you might have figured out by now, I've referred to poetry a few times. And so what I would ask you is, if you have a great verse from a poetry, type it in the question area, and I will call out in the end and read a couple of those. So don't be shy. Let people know, and especially if you are a poet yourself, write your own poetry. there's nothing more joyful to listen to someone's own poetry. So if you read something from another poet, that's good. That's great. I mean, that's. But if you have written yourself, please share, and we can both learn something in technology, and we can get to hear some of your great poetry. Alrighty, probably an unusual request, but why be usual? Right. So in diagramming, what I wanted to show was that, let's say I have a process here, but this particular activity, I want to say actually, no, let's not even put anything in here. I'll just go here and I'll say, drill down on this node. And I'm going to drill down into this node as another diagram. So I'll say level 2 diagram, right? So now this node is an anchor to level 2 diagram. So what I'll do is that I'll just save this, right? I'll save that. And then I'll click on edit. So when you hover, you'll see this toolbar, and you click on it, and you see it. You see the diagram opens up, and of course we can then go ahead and do the needful, create a diagram here, and that's level 2, and then this guy will go here and create another diagram in there. We'll call it level 3 diagram. And likewise, we'll just save this guy. And then for this guy, we'll again drill down into level 3. And so this is level 3. Okay. Just check that in. So if you go back to here, so this is level 2. So again, if I go to level 2, it'll navigate to level 2. And from level 2, I can go to level 3. And this will then now go to level 3. And so on and so forth. And so the whole idea is your diagramming doesn't have to be overwhelming. Of course, you can imagine if you try to model everything on a single canvas, it can get very, very complicated. So decompose your diagrams in logical ways so that it can be understood and maintained, as opposed to it becoming really complicated. Okay. And so that's to do with diagramming. I wanted to show you that. Oh yeah, and then of course you guys probably already know that in this kind of situation, let me actually make a couple of loops here. Not you, buddy. I need this guy here. And so I got a loop there, and that's probably fine for now. So you can go into analysis, and it will calculate the different scenarios for you. I call it the integration stories, how things come together. Or you can also calculate all your test cases and then publish those test cases, right? So, of course, the main pitch on using a diagram is that most people create diagrams, say in Visio or some other tool, and then you create your requirements independently, and then you go create scenarios and test cases, and those are all activities that are done independently. And so how likely is it that one, you'll tell the same story, and two, it's all interconnected properly, so the ideas are not in conflict, right? And obviously you don't want conflicting ideas, you want some consistency. So what we have done, we said, okay, not only can you create a diagram here, but you can then go ahead and create work items against these activities. And so your requirements are derived out of the diagram, and then you can go into analysis, auto-generate your test cases, and auto-generate your integration stories or scenarios, call it what you will, right? So that is sort of the idea of working with diagrams. Now, of course, previously I had actually started by creating diagrams directly in SmartDoc, but now I've created some diagrams which are, this was not created in level 2, wasn't created in SmartDoc, right? It was created directly from here, but I can always insert it into a SmartDoc. So it doesn't matter where you create it. You can always insert it as long as you have, what do you call, your meta template allows it. All right, so the last thing I wanted to show you was, obviously a lot of information is coming together and you want to see the coming together of things, right? So what do they look like? So if you go here, so let me just do a horizontal trace matrix. And in here, what you will see is let's say that I want epic to feature to user story to test case. Then that's your traceability matrix, right? So you can visualize these things like this and quickly be able to see how things are actually coming together, right? And how many ways can you establish this? How many ways can you organize your traceability? And I bet in a lot of different ways. But the beauty is you can quickly change these things and configure the output in whichever way you want it. All right, and likewise, you can generate your intersection matrix and sort of define different permutations on this. What I would go back to is really this slide here, right? Where what are the ways to use traceability, for example? And there are many ways to use traceability, and you can try out different things. And then through that process, you'll internalize how to optimize the use of all of the various tools that Modern Requirements makes available to you. So if you're looking for a recipe, of course, there's many ways of doing it. You can sort of ask us, or you can define one. But certainly, as you are trying to define that process, be adventurous. Look at things, think through clearly, or don't think clearly. Be confused, and try things, and through that you'll find clarity. So that's the message. That life is an adventure, so is building software and hardware and things. Embrace it. We provide you with a lot of wonderful tools to help you with what you do. But please keep your requests coming in. Nearly all of our R&D is done based on a client feedback. Once in a blue moon, I'll get an epiphany, and we'll go do something, or one of my team members will come up with an idea, we'll go do something. But absolutely, by far, the lion's share of our work is done by people giving us details. So guys, I'm going to take a couple of more questions that have been submitted and answer those. So there's one question that says, will this framework apply to Scrum, i.e. PBI, instead of user stories? Answer is yes, absolutely. So everything that I've shown you here, so Modern Requirements inherits the process template from Azure DevOps. And in inheriting that that process template, then it applies to Scrum, Agile, CMMI, BA BOK, a compliance template, or something that you have been more inventive on and created it on your own. So answer is yes. Review approval needs full license done. If your version of SmartDoc diagram version is well done, can you redline the document between versions? Yes, you can compare different SmartDoc versions. Is it possible to integrate a standard template diagram, integrate it into features and modify standard diagrams? Not sure what that means, but please send us an email and we'll sort of discover that with you. That's really it. So guys, I suppose I did throw a wrench into this whole thing by asking you guys to submit your favorite verse of a poem, but which nobody did. I'm so sad. Only if you guys could have shared your favorite verse, it would have been awesome, but that is okay. It was probably unfair of me, but for next time, next webinar, please keep that in mind. Share your poem. We will inspire all of us. And just before I say goodbye, there's a couple of other questions that I will, that's remaining. So one is, can stakeholders in Azure DevOps contribute to the requirements documents, or they need a full license? Yeah, in terms of contribution, you do need to have the basic license in Azure DevOps, and of course an MR license, but it has to be a basic license. I'm not sure when you say a full license, because Azure DevOps does have something that can cost you $500 a year versus, or $1,000 a year versus $20 or $30 a year. So it's really the basic, the low-end license for Azure DevOps. I think your contributors do need to have. And the last question is, working with standard templates, but then the customer wants another process. So if I can interpret this correctly, working with, then the customer wants another diagram, process of diagram. Yeah, guys. So that's the question that I'm still not clear about. So please send us an email, info@modernrequirements.com. Unless you know some people here, then write to them directly. And we can probably give you a more particular answer. Yeah, sorry, I didn't completely understand it, and so we'll leave it at that. So folks, thank you so much for attending today's webinar. I hope we can, you'll join us again for our next one. And as Amby mentioned, these webinars are happening about once every 3-4 weeks. The next one is on medical device process engineering. So if you are in the medical device or even sort of some hardware or systems kind of engineering, you'll certainly be interested. Unless you simply want to broaden your horizons, then join us regardless. Or if you just have a beautiful poetry to tell us that you have written, then join us as well. So with that, I will say, guys, have a wonderful day and stay safe. We'll speak soon. Bye-bye.